Um, uh, I'm Jean Latshaw. I'm right now with Pedcore Investments as the Vice President of Development. I did start out as with a nonprofit group. I had, quite frankly, a restaurant management background. Didn't really know a whole lot about real estate development. Trying to make a career move. And luckily had a great mentor with a nonprofit organization development that did affordable development in Texas. Stayed with them for a while and then was recruited by the state of Texas to actually administer the housing tax credit program. And did that for a few years. I say that because it was a really great experience to be in the public sector for just a little while. And I want to use that as an opportunity to say thank you to all of the staff that have worked to put this together. I have some understanding of the sometimes bureaucratic public sector and how hard all of you folks work. And so just want to say thanks for doing all of this. And that said too, I also did for a short time, I'm not on it now, but I did serve on the executive board of my own neighborhood organization a few years ago. And I know how much work that is too. There's a lot of volunteers that care a lot about their community. And so the people that are here today that are engaged and listening, I want to shout out to y'all too. I know it's a lot when you've got your own job and your kids and your house and all of your other stuff, and then you take the time out to engage in your community too. So kudos to everybody who is here. Let's get going. We are talking about housing diversity today, right? So when I was preparing this presentation, really the first thing I did was kind of remembering all of the different places that I have lived. I was born in a little apartment in the city of Houston. I don't remember that one. But then we lived in a very small home on the edge of the city, not much infrastructure. I remember playing in the ditch, backing up to the bayou. And then we moved out to the suburbs in a typical kind of single family home where my parents actually still live. True suburban neighborhood. Then I went off to college, lived in a dorm for a while, a whole bunch of apartments at the dorm, some of them with roommates, a long time without roommates, trying to make ends meet, working 2 jobs sometimes, a little bit of Houston, a little Austin, a little Dallas. Mixed in there, I stayed with my sister who lived on a Navy base. That was a different experience as well. Then once I got started in this industry, I'm working for a nonprofit. Again, so not a whole lot of money, but decided to downsize. I lived in this tiny little efficiency, working for the nonprofit, and I was biking to work until I saved enough money to buy a home. And I used a first-time home buyer program that I learned about when I in this industry. And that was a little tiny house, 4 bedrooms, but 1,100 plus square feet. You can imagine 1,100 square feet and tiny little bedrooms. I let a couple friends stay with me as they were also saving money to buy their own homes. That helped me pay the mortgage, pay a little rent. And then I got married. My husband moved into that house where my children were born. I worked from home for that nonprofit. It was very crowded, very small. And now we have since moved on from that home. I live in a pretty urban neighborhood, a single family home, but with schools and small businesses, restaurants, offices, apartments, all within a mile of me, right? I love that here. I know it's not everybody wants, but it's what we want right now for where we are, right? Some folks, want to be part of the busy streets in the city. We're kind of on a busy street. Want something maybe more suburban. Some folks want to be in a high-rise condo. And then I think about a friend of mine who's recently divorced with grown children. So even I was thinking about my friend who's, like I said, recently divorced, grown children, waiting for her youngest to graduate from college and not sure where she's going to wind up landing. So actually is choosing to rent. And my mother-in-law, who's lived in the same condo for decades and now wants to find something closer into town, but she's limited by her budget. So she might wind up renting or home sharing, or who knows. So I guess what I was thinking about, and like right off the bat, I'm sure all of us can think of a few different living situations that we've had in our own lives. And even if not, I'm sure we have friends and family who have been in very different living situations than we've ever been in. There's just a million different circumstances that would dictate whether you own, whether you rent, whether you're urban, suburban, whether you have a really big place, a really small place. And that's really, I think, what housing diversity is about, and why it's good for communities and neighborhoods and cities. Those folks who want to stay in their community and continue to invest in it, like y'all are here, and care about it, it allows you to change your specific living situation to meet your changing needs without having to leave your family and friends in the community. Um, and and I guess that's kind of my overarching theme here. Although I'm going to get into some things that I'm a little bit more knowledgeable about. um, so I was talking about my own living situation a minute ago, but I do want to say I am here from the perspective of being a developer. So this is a picture of PEDCOR's one development in Rowlett, and the reason that the folks at the City of Rowlett did reach out to me, the reason that they know me, this is Residences of Long Branch. It is an affordable community, multifamily, 76 units, right there on Rowlett Road. I'm sure a lot of you guys have been past it. Took a lot of time and a lot of work to get the support that we needed to build this project. But I'm glad we stuck with it. I think it looks great. I'm very proud of it. It leased up very quickly. We have very, very happy families living there. It's completely occupied, and I expect that it will remain so for the long term. So my job at PEDCOR is specifically to identify sites where we can actually build our product. And what I just showed you is what we do, right? And I want to talk about that a little bit later too. You know, we've had in our 30 years of existence, this company has built some commercial development, has built some market rate housing, but really what we're good at is apartment complexes, affordable communities, right? In my job, I'll drive around and I'll spot a piece of land, and then I have to start asking all of these questions, right? Does it have utilities? You know, is it a big mountain that I can't build on? You know, what is topography like, and how does that affect things like drainage? Obviously, zoning and development restrictions. If it's not zoned appropriately, do I think it's appropriate to change that zoning, and should I ask for that? The city's development regulations, are they going to allow me to build this product that I'm quite frankly good at building, right? Then let's say really all of these things are important, but willing sellers, you know, reasonably priced land, that's a huge factor. Just being able to actually get a piece of land under contract. You know, I think all of us, you know, might have ideal an idea about what should be built on any given piece of land. But the fact is, if the owner of that land doesn't want to sell it to you or have you build that, then you're stuck. It's really kind of up to them. And then really it's an ability to accurately predict what it's going to cost to build that development. Now we've been in business, like I said, for 30 years. That's why we keep kind of sticking with our product, because we're very confident about what it's going to cost to build it. We don't have a lot of surprises in there. When you start changing things up, that's when you can start to get in a little bit of trouble. So I do all of these things as part of my due diligence when I'm driving around doing my job. And then the most important though is market demand. So the reason I might be driving around in Rowlett in the first place is because we identified it as an overall thriving community, general demand for housing, high rents, high home prices, low vacancies, healthy commercial centers, all of those things. But then once I get to the point of getting past those practical considerations, I really need to dial down into the market. I need specific information on the comparable properties around me, You need to be confident that the development of this particular site, not just in Rowlett in general, will be successful. And I encourage you, when developers of any kind come before you with a proposal, to ask them about what kind of market analysis they have conducted. Let's say we feel great about a market, but going back to those practical considerations, we're asked to build a product that is not what we originally planned. And unfortunately, this does happen. So a recent trend in development regulations across the state and the country have called for mixed use development. These can be very successful, but they can also turn into eyesores. This slide shows a little bit of both. What we all want, and I don't know if y'all can, this is on the right or the left for you. Pretty one on the right, big, nice one, right? We want to build these things and then they're bustling with crowds, people at the restaurants and the retail centers, and they look great, right? But what does happen is that a developer will come in, say that they want to build multifamily, right? Development regulations say you've got to have commercial stuff on the bottom. And they say, that's fine, we're going to build it anyway. And quite frankly, don't even underwrite any of that commercial space ever even being filled. And then you wind up with things like these. These are very recent developments in and around the city of Dallas with vacant commercial space. In the worst case, boarded up space that just never gets filled up. And it's because the developer pushed through, right, with building a product that they should not have built because there was no market for it. So again, market. That is really what this entire what really should be driving a lot of these decisions, in my opinion, when you're talking about housing diversity, diversity of types of development. If the market doesn't call for the commercial space, it's a mistake to build it. If it does call for the commercial space, it's a great thing to build it, right? I'm going to skip this slide for 1 second because I know and I'll come back to it. Some demographic information that helped us with our market, but also some other concerns. You know, I know that folks have when housing developers come in, whether it's single family, multifamily, rental, ownership, you know, the environmental impacts on that development. And that, I would say, is largely solved by city regulations. I know Rowlett, just like a lot of other sophisticated cities, have, you know, tree ordinances, drainage requirements, all of these things to address those environmental concerns. And so if there are concerns about that, I think that the most appropriate thing to do is read those codes, right? Read those regulations. And when the city goes to amend them in any way, make sure that you're commenting on it. And you say, you know, I think our tree ordinance needs to be more restrictive, or maybe it doesn't because you're preventing, you know, development from happening, whichever way it is, right? But your city does address this in the permitting process. And so get with them, get engaged. Y'all are already engaged right now, right? Schools are a concern. I will tell you this too. The best thing to do, you know, we are all growing, right? Austin's growing, Rowlett's growing. You know, there's going to be more kids in the school. So the best thing to do is notify them early. All of these developments take a long time from the time that I'm finding a site to them actually having people living in them. You know, it's the responsibility of the public school districts to educate the kids that are in their district, right? But the best thing that you can do is give them lead time. Say, you know, you're going to have 100 kids coming in here. And I can say too that developers should have, and school districts do have, predictive information about what they're building and pretty accurately predict how many kids and what age they might be in any given development. We have a huge portfolio. We gather all of that data. We know that, let's say, what is it? 23% of our residents have one adult and have children. 12% are two adults and have children. And the rest are seniors and occupied by students, right? So we can plug that into a formula and kind of set that out and engage with people. So I think that's something that you should ask developers to do as well. And then let's talk about traffic, because that's everybody's favorite thing. So this, I love this, this graphic that you can find on census data. So I hope that y'all can see this, but the green circle, the goal here, so this is showing folks commuting into Rowlett to work, and then folks living and work and commuting out, right? So if you want to solve a traffic problem, you've got to do this thing where you see all of these cities say you want to live, work, play in the same place, right? What you want is that bottom number, the number on the circle, that 1,394, to be bigger, right? Those are people that are living in Rowlett and working in Rowlett. They're not commuting out, they're not commuting in, they're not causing this traffic congestion. And in order to do that, we really do have to move to addressing some affordable housing too. I'm watching my time here. Trying to talk really fast. So that brings me back up to this slide, right? So these are some demographic information about Rowlett, 22,000 households, 85% owner occupied, 15% renter. That actually tracks really closely with your percentage of single family and multifamily units too. It's that 85 to 15%, which really makes sense, right? But I think some things that might surprise some folks is that there are 7,500 households earning less than 75K in Rowlett, right? And so that doesn't seem to match up completely with the median property value of $228,000. You know, if you're making 75K, that might be a tough, that might be tough to afford, right? So what you can probably assume is that there are a lot of people, and this is not unique to Rowlett, this is across the state, across the country, a lot of people that are housing cost burdened. And you can define that however you'd like. The typical definition is that you spend more than 30% of your income towards housing costs, right? But these numbers reflect what you're going to see in a lot of communities, right? That there are folks that are housing cost burdened. And who are some of those folks, right? Who earns less than 50K in Rowlett? So there are about 3,500 folks who live in Rowlett who earn less than 50K. And I just quickly went on Indeed.com to see where those jobs were, who those people were: patient service coordinator, veterinary technician, tutor, guest service representative, 911 call taker, a lot of jobs, right? A lot of jobs that are needed in the community and are just, they're paying $15 an hour, right? We don't want those jobs to go away, right? We just don't want folks to have to drive 30 minutes to that job that pays them $15 an hour, right? Because there's not an affordable place to live nearby. And that takes me back to this map, right? That's, in my opinion, if I look at this map for my own community, like I said, I want that number in the circle to be as big as possible, right? That's going to lessen your traffic congestion. That's going to also really help have an engaged community that lives and works together, right? I'm trying to fly through these so that I can get everywhere. But Connor, do I have any questions or comments or anything that we need to address? I think I'm going to be fine.
Not so far, Jean.
Okay.
I'll let you guys know as soon as we wrap up. We do have about 7 or so minutes.
Great. I will throw out some kind of interesting statistics that I got from this map too. So this indicates for the city, and this is all from the census data on the map website. It's really fun if you guys want to fool around with it. There are 10,328 jobs in Rowlett. So 26% of them pay $1,250 a month or less. That's $15,000 a year, right? So 26% of those jobs. 36% of those jobs pay between that $15,000 and $50,000. So, and just 37% pay above $50,000 a year. So again, a lot of jobs, and again, this is not necessarily unique to Rowlett, but but it is this kind of systemic problem that we have, where there's just no affordable place to live near where you work. And you know, it's diverse housing stock that can help solve that problem. So, and I know everybody gets really tense about affordable housing in particular, right? That is where my expertise lies, not necessarily multifamily in general, but with respect to affordable housing, you know, there were some bad programs out there, right? There were some bad federal government programs that produced some bad products that it didn't work very well. But that has gone away. The public housing from decades ago that did not work is not being built anymore. So there's no fear of that rundown, poorly managed product being built again. Now you're going to have some bad actors out there, right? But that's on a market rate side and an affordable side. You know, you're going to have a bad developer out there once in a while, unfortunately. But the programs themselves, typically in this era, don't lend themselves towards responsible, good management. The affordable housing of today, the tax credit program does produce more units of affordable housing than any other program out there. It does not provide a rent subsidy. There are programs that do. There are housing choice vouchers, and there are rent subsidy programs out there. But every time that you hear the word affordable housing, it does not necessarily mean rent subsidy. A lot of times it'll simply mean an incentive that the developer received to be able to provide reduced rents. But typically you're looking at communities where tenants need to pay their rent. They need to have some income. They need to have a job so that they can pay that rent, and that owner manager can support their mortgage. And affordable housing is not always exempt from property taxes. It is sometimes, but not always. And that's a question worth asking too when you hear some of these proposals come to you in your community. Now this I love. So this is actually taken from the National Home Builders Association. Some revenue and jobs that are generated by multifamily development. I picked 240 units because that's kind of a typical size for us, right? So the one that I had shown you earlier that we built in Rowlett is quite a bit smaller, but you know, when you're looking at your typical garden style 3-story multifamily development, I chose 240. So if you can picture that in your head, that's 10 buildings with, you know, 3 stories, 24 units in them. So $18.9 million in local income. That's amazing, right? 293 local jobs, $13.4 million in local wages and salaries, 72 ongoing local support jobs. That's your property managers and your maintenance staff, all sorts of support services that go on with that. But these, if you look at housing as an income generator, a revenue and jobs generator, which it is, it's not exactly the same as a traditional commercial development, but it is part of all of that economic growth, right? And we all want, you know, another Starbucks and more commercial stuff out there. But the fact is there too is that these commercial developers come in and they count rooftops, right? They draw a circle and they count rooftops, and when there's enough rooftops, they come in and then they say there's enough market for me, right? Back to that big market demand question, which is driving all of us crazy developers, right? But if you look at housing as part of that entire economic development, then maybe it starts to not give so much heartburn. And that's whether it's single family homes, right? Or rental or multifamily or whatever it is. So I think I made it. I did. Look at that. I'm right at almost 9:30, right? I had a fun story that I could tell about one of our residents. But I will open that up for questions and I can come back to this story if you'd like.
Awesome. Thank you, Jean. And let me go ahead and I'm going to actually stop your sharing so that I can see everybody. I'm going to put everybody in the gallery mode. If you do have a question, I see I've got a cell phone caller who's unmuted, who might not have the ability to send in the chat. But if anybody does have a question, please put it in the chat, and I will sort of read it out. Otherwise, or you could always use your raise hand function, which is at the bottom of the screen, to also kind of indicate that you have a question. So I'll just kind of open that up to everybody. If you do have a question, feel free to ask. I see.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. I really thought it was very helpful and informative. The question I've got to use, because I'm an audio user, will your slides and materials be able to, can we review those at a later time or something like that?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll answer that for Gene. Yes, we will have all of our recordings and presentation material available for anybody that would like it. There should be a contact information on our website to achieve that. We'd be happy to share that with you. Okay, that might answer. I do see Alex. If you do have a question, I've got you. I'm very proud of you. You've got your hand raised.
Thank you, Connor. Gene, thank you for your presentation. I had a question for you. As you've been doing these projects in various cities and around various neighborhoods, are there any times where you've taken a regulation or a requirement from a city to another project that you've done in another city where there is not a requirement, and also any times neighbors have made an ask of you that should, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and you start incorporating those things into your projects?
That's a great question, and absolutely, yes. I can't think of a whole lot of city to city, but what you made me think of is some of our own internal development requirements, if you will. Some of them are pretty technical, like an additional firewall that we put in between inside buildings that we always have to explain to each municipality every time we go to permitting. And we're like, hey, this is one building and we're putting this additional firewall in here, but you know, this is really the way to kind of evaluate this. And it's really just an extra safety measure for us, right? And things like power lines. Our development owners are very sensitive about that. So we do this really detailed analysis of how much voltage comes from like, it looks like this big tree, this big graph that we have, that and to make sure that there's not too much exposure to voltage or something like that. So I guess my answer is maybe not city to city, but experience to experience, where we say, hey, you know, this might not be part of your regulation, but we're going to run this test anyway. And if we're not comfortable with it, it's a no, right? Even though, sure, it would be okay for your regulations. And I'm sorry, what was your second question?
If there was anything that neighbors had asked for projects that you also then started to just add into your normal proposals.
Yeah, the one that I can think of the most where we had a lot of neighborhood engagement was one that we had down in San Antonio, and we wound up reducing the number of units there and kind of spread the buildings out a little bit more. But they also wanted us to connect to a public trail and have like some solar lights that we put in to connect to that trail, and some additional bike parking and things like that, stuff that was really important to them. So we changed quite a few things on that development just because there was a lot of neighborhood engagement. So the answer is yes. And I will say, we can't say yes to everything, right? Sometimes we say, you know, we would love to do that, but we can't. Oh, but that's right. We have one in Denton too, where this is our first time for like a butterfly garden, but they wanted a butterfly garden. So there it is. So yes, we make every effort. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex, for the question. I don't have any other questions here in the chat. If anybody would like to either raise their hand or perhaps come on screen and I can kind of call on you. If not, Gene, you mentioned, I see Maladad has muted her camera in a way.
Hello, Manal.
How
It's
are
great
you,
to see
Jean?
you. I'm
Good
great.
to see you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate this. I really enjoyed listening to your presentation. And again, some of the elements that you provided to us are good takeaways for all of us, including our community. So once again, thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay, I don't see any other questions here in the chat. Jean, we do have about 5 minutes left before I will kind of debrief and send everybody back into the main session. If you did have time for that story, I'm sure we would love to hear it in these last couple of minutes.
I do. So I love telling this story. I'm going to tell it again at another conference here coming up on a slightly different topic. But I am also part of the Texas Affiliation of Affordable Housing Providers that is a trade association. We do a little bit of lobbying to with the Texas legislature, you know, on affordable housing issues, right? And so we were educating a U.S. congressman, not even just a Texas legislator, but it's really exciting to have a U.S. congressman that was interested in our product come to tour one of our sites. And so I went up to one of our properties, and years ago, there was a story about one of our residents who we hired, and she just had a really beautiful story about how it just kind of living in that development really changed her life for the better. And so I walked in the door and I said, "Hey, remember, you know, that beautiful story about Jessica, I think her name was, you know," and I said, "You know, I'm wondering if there is any similar situation here." And I'm meeting the property manager there, you know, the regional manager. And he said, "Well, yeah, me." And I was like, "Oh, well, what is your story?" Right? So he lived in one of our properties. He was a manager at Torchy's Tacos, right? Which pretty typical job, love Torchy's. We need more managers of more Torchy's, right? But wasn't making a whole lot of money, right? So qualified to live in one of our income and restricted developments. So he gets to know our staff, walks in to pay his rent one day, and we offer him a job. So he becomes a leasing agent. I'm not sure at that time if he was still living on property, probably was, you know, as an entry-level leasing agent, but eventually got promoted several times with our company, and now manages over almost 1,000 units, 900 units, several properties in the Austin area, makes too much money to live in our developments anymore, but bought a house, got married, changed his life, right? And that's exactly, that's a real story.